Today I'm going to be talking about a yoga pose called Pigeon. And there's many different variations of Pigeon pose, and I'm going to be talking about the more traditional version of the pose, which I'll show you in a moment. And specifically what I'm going to be talking about is why I don't do this version of the pose anymore. I don't teach it in classes. I don't do it myself personally. I'm going to do it briefly for a moment just so you can see the mechanics of the pose, and I can explain what's going on and why I don't teach this pose anymore. So I'll go ahead and start to come into the pose. So I'm going to pull one leg forward, and then the knee goes down, and then you slide the back leg back, and you're just kind of settling in here. And whether you stay upright or fold forward or more, there's different ways that people do it. But this is the basic shape of the pose I wanted to discuss. And what's potentially problematic in this pose is what's being asked of the hip in this position is extreme external rotation in the socket. And then it's also flexing towards the torso. A lot of people don't have good flexion and external rotation combined. So then what happens is if the hip can't do that movement, then the knee tries to make up some of that movement. And so this pose can put either too much pressure or stress in the hip socket itself. It can put pressure and stress in the knee. Some people also feel it in the ankle. And in the more classic version of the pose, they try to get students to pull this foot forward and get it parallel to the front edge of the mat. I've never been able to do that in my entire life, and most people can't. So let me show you the side view of this pose too. So the main joints that are at risk in this version of the pose because of gravity are the front leg hip, the front knee, the ankle potentially, and then the other thing is your back. So if you see here on me, my buttock is not touching the floor on this front leg. What that means for a lot of people is they're off kilter when they do this pose, and that can really aggravate low back and sacroiliac joints specifically. So those are some of the main areas that are at risk in the pose: the hip, the knee, ankle, and then the low back sacroiliac joints. So now let me go over what are some alternative ways. Why are we even doing this pose? It's because, externally rotating the hip, it's a movement we want the hip to be able to do. When we do it, we stretch some muscles around the hip joint itself. So let me go over some alternatives that are less risky for the body. So first one is simply sitting in a chair. You lift one foot and you cross it over like you were going to tie your shoes or put on a pair of socks. And this is a lot easier on the hip and the knee because you don't have the weight of the body pressing you down in that extreme range of motion. It's easier to adjust your stance in terms of where the foot is on the leg. It's easier for this knee and hip to find a comfortable position because you're not having the body pressing it down. And from here, it just becomes a leaning forward, keeping a fairly elongated spine, till you feel that stretch happening back in those kind of buttock outer hip muscles. Remember, you shouldn't feel it in the hip socket itself in the front. You shouldn't really feel it in the knee. If you're feeling it in either one of those spots, then, find a different position or a different alternative. Okay, the second one I'll show you is basically this, but standing, which is sometimes called funky chair. I'm not going over these in detail, but I just wanted to give you a sense of all the alternative ways we can do that general shape of the pose. So in the standing version, you bend the knees, you lift one foot. I like to use a wall, cross the ankle over, same position in the chair, and then from here you can bend and press more down or stay more up. And again, it's easier to adjust your position here, less tension in the hip and the knee because of gravity. Okay, now I'll go over another one, which would be lying on the back. The great thing about the one lying on the back is the spine is totally supported by the floor. And so in terms of the low back and the sacroiliac joints, super safe. Cross one ankle over the other thigh. And again, you just let this leg be relaxed, not trying to force the hip into some place that it doesn't want to go. And then it's pulling the legs towards you. That's one way to do it. And then another way to do it is to keep that other foot on the floor and just hold on to the knee and the foot. And maybe even straightening that bottom leg. So you see how this really looks more like the more traditional version of the pose, but it's like you're doing it on the ceiling. And how low this foot is down towards the pelvis or high up, a lot of that has to do with your hip and your knee, of course. So that's a version of it lying down. Another version is sitting on the floor. I usually sit on blocks when I do this one. Get my sit bones a little up. And then in this one, again, same basic shape. Cross one ankle over the other thigh. And then you start to bend that other leg and get the foot more flat. You might need to lean back into your hands here. You might be able to just hold yourself up by holding on to your legs. Lifting through the chest. And again, not forcing this knee and hip to do something that doesn't feel beneficial. This is another version. And then let's see, I'll just show you one more. So there's one you can do using the wall where you don't have to use your hands at all. So, and this another one is nice because you can adjust how close or far away you are from the wall based on your skeleton and your muscles. So foot on the wall, cross the other leg over. And again, you could scoot yourself further away from the wall to have less of an angle, or closer to the wall for more of an angle. And again, because the back's on the floor, the SI joints, lower back, much safer in this position. So, I know it was a lot of information. And again, the intention wasn't to go over in detail all those modifications, but simply to give you an idea of how you can get the benefits of the general shape of the pose of Pigeon without the risks that come with the more traditional version of the pose. I hope you found this helpful. And remember, no joint pain in any pose. So any expressions of these positions that I did today, if you're getting hip or knee pain, don't do it. Try to modify it and see if you can find a more comfortable position for your body.